life as an outsider. I'm your host, Jake Schneider. Unfortunately, not with my co-host this morning. Tyler Townson is unable to join me, but we are here at the Iowa Podcast Awards here in Studio 81 at the Armstrong Hub, and I am joined by somebody who I thought would be a great fit for this event, a podcast producer, a true crime author, because let's be honest, 90% of podcasts are true crime at this point. So I kind of feel like that's appropriate. I'm joined by my friend Kelli Brink. Kelli, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Sorry your co-host couldn't make it. You're stuck with me.
You know what? I will absolutely take it. This is an absolute blast. Thank you for making the journey down.
Yeah.
Kelli, you have produced and co-hosted so many podcasts over the past couple of years that I was really, when I was thinking about people, I thought, I think that Kelli would be a good fit, even if we're not able to, share everything, give all the little secrets away. I feel like it's a good starting point.
Good. Well, I'm happy to share my knowledge, whatever that may be, but it's been a good ride. It's been about 7 years in podcasting, so.
That's awesome. What I like to do every time we do an episode is I like to have these quick fire questions. So if you see me looking at my phone, I'm not texting your mom, I'm doing these quick fire questions. I might be texting your mom. See, this is why I don't do live episodes. I actually have people to laugh.
My mom is like, she's 85, but you might be texting her. I mean, she's big on the dating apps.
All right, so quick fire questions. We're just going to move right past that. So just as quick as you can, just give me some of these answers off the top of your head. Starting off, very first one, who'd play you in a movie?
Isla Fisher.
I love it. I love it. If you had only 3 albums or movies, so music albums or movies on a desert island, which would you pick?
Oh, my goodness. Oh, I would pick for a movie, and I Castaway, because maybe I could learn something from it.
Yeah, that's fair.
I would then probably albums. Turnpike Troubadours and Paul Cawthon off the top of my head.
Turnpike's great. I don't know that I've heard of Paul Cawthon before, so
you need to learn him. He's great.
I'll have to check him out later. Absolutely. What is one of your favorite scents?
Thanksgiving dinner cooking in the oven.
We're getting close.
We are getting close. It just reminds me of like family and good times and everyone all together. So, yeah.
I love that. I had somebody say melted butter, and I had somebody say something other that was a little bit more inappropriate. So Thanksgiving dinner is great. First time I asked this guy a question, I go, "Oh yeah, what's your favorite smell?" And he drops this super inappropriate thing. I was like, "Well, that's getting cut out for YouTube."
I can imagine what it was. Okay.
What was your dream job growing up?
I wanted to be a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader. Always.
I love that.
From the time I was really little, that's all I would talk about. I did end up being a cheerleader in high school and stuff, but didn't make it my career, but that's okay.
That's fine. I feel like you are much more suited. I'm digging a hole right now. Immediately digging a hole.
What do you got?
I feel like you are doing very well with the podcasting thing. Not more suited for it. I'm not going to say that because I'm not stupid. If you could relocate anywhere in the world, country or in country, out of country, where would you relocate?
Well, it wouldn't be out of Iowa, I'll tell you that.
Really?
I travel a lot for work, and the more I travel, the more I love Iowa. I love coming home back to Iowa. I love the people. It's beautiful here. It's very what's the word? But yeah, it's beautiful. I love it, and it's where my family is, most of my family. So I would stay in Iowa. Maybe I'd move to Des Moines.
Iowa is... There's something special about it. Mm-hmm. I went out to New Jersey to record an episode this summer, and talking with Johnny out in New Jersey, of course his name's Johnny, it's New Jersey, talking with Johnny out in New Jersey about the community that was out there and the community that we have here in Iowa, it was similar but still different. Like there's, for some reason, I call Iowa a small town because everybody knows everybody, but it feels like something is special about here in Iowa.
I agree. And it's not just us saying that, being from Iowa. My friends who come here to visit and clients come and visit me here and stuff, they're like, wow, they just love it. Like I've had people come and visit me and then they're like looking for apartments the next day because they're like, I could live here. I don't know what it is. I think it's a lot to do with the people. I think people here are great.
Yeah, the people here are fantastic, as well as, cost of living is not terrible. There's still some things to do. Like, it's not New York where you're going to have something to do every single night. But there's still some fun things to do. There's nothing better, talking about favorite scents, like a campfire, a bonfire.
Oh, yeah.
You can't have that out in the middle of New Jersey.
No.
Not legally. And there's just something about that sort of community atmosphere.
Yeah.
Which really kind of leads me into talking about podcasting and this community that you've built in podcasting. So you said you've been doing it for about 7 years or so. You have produced, you've hosted, you've done social media management for other people. What really kind of led you into that as a career?
Well, I have a communications degree, so I did a lot of like media studies during that time, but I worked in radio in my 20s, and there's just always something about audio that has fascinated me. I've always loved like old time radio shows and like Garrison Keillor, Prairie Home Companion, stuff like that. I've always been obsessed with the magic of audio, being able to just hear it and paint that picture, the story in your brain. I've always loved it. So when podcasts became a thing, I was like an obsessed consumer of podcasts. I just listened to podcasts all the time. And I was like, you know what? I know how to do all this. I'm just going to start a podcast. So I started, and there were a lot of like high profile crimes and stuff happening in the area I lived, some murders that were pretty big in the news. So true crime was my thing, and I started my own podcast and started going to conventions and networking with bigger podcasters, and it's just been like this weird journey, like flowing one job at a stepping stone into the next, and that's where it started. But yeah.
In doing that, you're talking about networking. We were talking about that earlier before we started recording, just the necessity of collaboration and community within the podcast. I don't want to say society, but within the podcast realm, it's very much similar to somebody who's doing short films, somebody who's acting, somebody who is trying to start a business. It's all about that networking and that community. The necessity for community, though, it also sounds like that is something that helped you in your early stages. That community really helped you grow, which in turn has helped other people grow.
Yeah, I would not be where I am in my career without my like tribe of fellow podcasters and my true crime people and stuff. I've had a lot of help, like I went to a convention and I met the captain from True Crime Garage. If you guys know podcasts, true crime podcasts, they're a really big one. And like he made my theme music for my first true crime podcast, and that was awesome. And just it's been all about collaboration for me from day one. It's been really important to grow. So now, I still do collab a lot on my current podcast, but in a different way. So, but yeah. Yep.
Yeah, collaboration, it really is key. And like we were talking about, it depends on what you want to do with your podcast, whether it's growing it into a career or just having it as a hobby. But the important thing is being accessible to other people, I think, is a huge thing as well. And you can do that easier when you have that community behind you that's collaborating together, saying, oh yeah, I worked with this person. This person's great. Or, hey, I worked with this person. This person sucks. So it's really good to have that sort of community. When you first started producing your podcasts and producing podcasts for other people, what were some of the things that you noticed in podcasts that were successful? Now, everybody defines success differently, whether it's making a career or even just continuing on for more than 3 or 4 years versus podcasts that kind of fizzled out.
I think consistency is like the number one. You've got some podcasters who have full-time jobs and cannot release an episode every week or whatever. But I think like the really successful ones, it's big priority. So they're consistent. They release like every Tuesday at 5 a.m. and they do whatever it takes to get that episode out at 5 a.m. on Tuesday every week, week after week. Organization and planning. I think one good thing that I like when people do is they have like 4 episodes or whatever recorded ahead of time in the can, waiting to come out because you never know when life's going to happen, and just really good planning and organization. And yeah.
Yeah, that's something I can attest to. For people that had listened to my podcast before, know that this summer was really rough for me because of the flooding that I had in my apartment 3 times in a row that my landlord never fixed. And I'm not bitter about that at all, even though they let mold rot in my apartment. Thanks. But having those episodes in the can was absolutely essential, because there were weeks when I wasn't able to record because I was lifting up my desk and drying the floorboards underneath. And like you said, you never know when life is going to hit. Whether it's a tragedy like that, or we saw those storms all over Iowa, other Iowa podcasters, or say you fall and get hurt and you're in the hospital for a week.
Right.
That consistency is so key. And
planning ahead, just keeping really organized with your stuff, having it. Absolutely. And that's one thing I would echo to any other podcasters who ever end up listening to this. Don't go gung-ho right away. Just take a second. When I first started recording, I recorded 4 or 5 episodes and waited a month to release it, because I was like, hey, I want to make sure I've got a few ready. And people get so excited because this is a fun, exciting thing that we're doing. I mean, we're sitting down BSing with people, talking about life. It's great. Why wouldn't you want to be doing that right away? But slow your roll, take a beat, get some backstock, go forward. Yeah, one that reminds me also, I like it, like if you're launching a new podcast, don't just put one out the first time. I think it's really awesome to put like 3 episodes out when you're premiering your podcast. I think that's good advice. People can binge listen and get like a better feel for what you're all about. They can do that more with like a few episodes than just one.
Well, speaking of that consistency and releasing a couple episodes, do you ever think that it gets to a point where you're releasing so much that people can't keep on top of it?
That's a good question. No, I don't think so. I mean, I think every day, if you're like Joe Rogan, doesn't he release like every day?
3 hours every day.
I mean,
it's
that's
insane.
a lot to keep up with. No one can keep up with that. But the thing about podcasting is, or podcasts, people binge listen and they're like remodeling their kitchen or something, and they've got a podcast going on, and so they're like listening to, if they love you, they're going to want to listen to multiple episodes at the same time. Like the ones I love the most, I know that they've gotten me through like home remodels because I am just listening to the whole entire season and stuff. So yeah.
And I will say, when I was working for a soft drink company and delivering soft drinks, I would have my headphones in all day long. And so being able to have specifically the Ken Coleman podcast, he's the one that inspired me to start my own, releases every day, part of the Dave Ramsey group. So they release it with their business. That is a great example of that, because it's something new and fresh every day. And they were like 30-minute episodes versus something like the JRE where he's releasing 3-4 hour episodes every day. Like it's so hard to stay on top of that. Yeah.
But his diehards are like, they just want more of it. I think it depends on what your listeners are into.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's key. One of the podcasts I listen to the most is called Distractable. It comes out every Monday and Wednesday. It's Markiplier and a bunch of 2 of his friends, and they get together and play stupid games. One of them will be the host, and he'll make the other 2 do stupid stuff. It's hilarious, and I always have it on when I'm cleaning my kitchen because it's so easy to listen to. Do you think that there should be a diversification in topic when it comes to a podcast, or do you think you should really focus on one thing and lean into it?
I definitely am big on niches. I think, I don't know. There are the podcasts that are just like talking about life, talking about everything, chatty stuff, and those are fun too. But I
would hope so.
Yeah, no. But I'm a big niche person. Well, being in true crime, we're very like niche. So I don't know.
I think that definitely, in the ones that I've seen have succeeded, or not, stopped recording after a year or so, have really focused on that niche stuff. And I 100% agree with you on that. I think that is something that most people don't realize when they start podcasting, because so many people are like, oh, I just want to share these conversations with my friends.
Yes, because they're having fun with their friends. They're laughing to each other. You guys are hilarious. Are you going to be, is that going to translate to a listening audience? I don't know. Maybe sometimes it does, but I think focus in a little more on that subject matter.
I definitely agree. When it comes to audio and video, have you seen in the podcasts you've helped produce, have you seen an uptick in their popularity when they introduce video, or do you think that they should focus only on the audio?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So that is just like in the last couple years has gotten super popular. These short little like Instagram reels and YouTube shorts and stuff. So I worked on a podcast where we did those and we would get a lot of views on Instagram, but it didn't really translate into downloads in the podcast. So I don't know. I'm so in love with the origin of podcasting being based in audio. I have mixed emotions about video coming in. It's a whole different thing. It's like at that point you're doing a TV show pretty much. And so I don't always see like the download numbers increasing just because someone's like liking your Instagram reel. It doesn't always motivate them to go subscribe to your podcast. But that's the idea behind the video, is that we want people to be so intrigued by that little clip that they're going to go listen to the podcast. But doesn't always happen. And the most successful podcasts that I've worked on didn't do video at all. They would release like a video version for their Patreon or something, but they didn't do video clips on social media or anything. And they've been great. Like a lot of the true crime people I've worked with, they don't do that. But now they're feeling like, oh, I need to keep up and I need to do this video. But I don't really think it's super necessary.
Well, and I think it also speaks to the topic of the podcast as well, because I can imagine how hard it would be doing a true crime podcast video form. I mean, you're people sitting there talking about true crime. It's when you start editing it in and maybe doing recreations, and then, like you said, it's a TV show at that point. It's a free TV show.
Right.
I think it's interesting that you said that it doesn't necessarily lead to download numbers either. I think so often people who work in this sort of realm see numbers combine, where they see, oh yeah, I just got 1,500 views on this Instagram video, so that must mean that I'm going to get 100 more listens on my... No,
it really doesn't.
Not necessarily.
No, and I worked for a while at a company that did podcast production all over the U.S., mostly for like amateur podcasters who were trying to promote their business or something like that. But they all wanted to grow, and they thought the way to do that was video. But really, the way to grow and succeed is like a good base of audio content, good subject matter, interesting topics, good guests. That's the best thing you can do for your podcast, I think. So, I've had people who are like, I want a green screen behind me. I want better lighting, but that doesn't help your podcast, so.
I think that is absolutely a point that people so often miss, is focusing on the things that brought people into your podcast in the first place. Focus on that. People didn't start listening to you because you look good.
Right.
Like the saying, oh, I've got a face for radio. I mean, I live by that saying. Got a freaking zit right here.
No one can see it. Your mom did a good job with your makeup today, Jake.
Hey, I did it myself this morning. I'm really proud of myself for not doing makeup since high school. When I was in theater. I just want to throw that out there. I should have thrown in
not just every day.
Yeah, no, should have thrown in the guy liner. Where are you? And I'm going to get copyright struck. I think that's key, though, is being able to focus on that core that really grabs people in, that hook. Because when you're able to refine that hook, what brought somebody to your podcast? Was it the guest? Okay, focus on the cool guests. Was it your voice? Okay, focus on the cool voice. Was it your questions? Refine those questions. Being able to focus on that instead of saying, well, they came because of the guest, so maybe I got to get the guest on camera next. I gotta say, I think you're kind of leaning in the wrong direction that way.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I think that, obviously we have video today, which is great. Thanks, guys. You guys are great. But this was not my idea.
I love video. I love having that extra component, but it's like, do you want a YouTube channel now, or do you want to do just your podcast? Because then you're going into a whole different territory. Like, that's a whole different animal, YouTube and being a social media influencer and stuff. But yeah. Then you're like having to wear so many different hats.
And that's part of the reason I got really burnt out this summer. So when I talked with Johnny off camera, I asked him, I was like, hey, so what do you think the best way to grow my podcast would be? And one of the things that he said was, gotta start doing video. And I got so exhausted with the idea of combining all this video, and to the point where my co-host and I got into it couple weeks ago, because I was like, I don't want to do video. I don't want to keep trying to grow it that way. I'm exhausted. And we were finally able to come to an understanding, maybe because I humbled myself. But that idea of content creation sounds so appealing to so many people that they don't realize the stress that it can put. Like when I talked to Johnny, he said, first time I went viral, it was fun. Now I feel like I have to, because this is my life now. And so it's not fun. It's a sigh of relief. And I said, I don't ever want that. But you can go too far on the opposite end and just say, well, I don't care about it anymore. So you have to find that middle ground.
Definitely. And there are things that help, I use some software called Vizard. It's an AI software that makes clips for you. So I just stick my video into it and it pulls what would potentially be like the most interesting clips. And then I don't have to do the manual labor of cutting video clips and stuff like that.
There
There are a lot of time savers if you really feel like you have to do video, but it's just it's a full-time job adding all these things on. So yeah.
Well, and if you're not already making money on your podcast, you're having a full-time job, which means that you're going to add another full-time job on top of that. And in this economy, heck no.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Well, people think, podcasting is, it's not cheap. It's not free. There's a lot of expenses that go along with it. So, yeah.
Yeah. And people don't realize the cost of the equipment, the cost of your time. People don't factor in their time when it comes to the cost of a podcast. Same thing with as many small businesses as I've talked to over the past couple of years. The ones that were really struggling at first were underpricing themselves because they weren't counting their time as part of the package. And that's one thing that I think people need to remember is your time is valuable because you've only got so much. I mean, you've got 52 Thursdays in a year. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to do it for free? Well, no. But are you going to charge somebody, $250 to come on your podcast? No, you just have to realize, count the cost, figure out what am I giving up? Because anytime you say yes to anything, you're saying no to something else. Not to discourage people from doing a podcast. We love people that do podcasts.
Totally. And I will say also, there are a lot of costs involved, but if you have this burning desire to start your own podcast, it doesn't have to be expensive either.
Right.
I started my podcast with a really shitty computer and like a $15 microphone I got on Amazon, just a USB plug and play, not difficult at all. And I used Audacity for free to edit everything and just learned how to use that. And I think I put my first podcast on Anchor for free back when it was Anchor, and lots of YouTube tutorials, and you can Google anything. So I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from
right.
doing
Absolutely.
It. Yeah.
I totally agree. I mean, I started this podcast with a gaming headset and a Google Chromebook. If you know a Chromebook, it's a piece of crap. It's basically a Nintendo Wii with a screen. It's not great, but it works. This is why I don't have a live audience. This guy's over here cracking up and I'm losing focus. The whole reason I did my podcast, though, was because I had something to say. I had something I wanted to learn. The whole reason I started it was because I wanted to learn about starting a small business. So you ask the questions you want to know that you think other people want to hear the answers to.
That's a great idea. You wanted to learn about starting a small business, so you started a podcast asking experts to kind of teach you, and they're happy to teach you and share their knowledge. That's a really cool idea.
Exactly. And thank you. One of the other things about it is being willing to adapt and grow, though, because as you can tell, like, I don't always have just business owners on my podcast anymore. In fact, one of the episodes I have pretty recently, Blake Townson, he's not a business owner. He's a good buddy of mine. One of the things you have to realize is the more that you grow your audience, people will want different things. And I realized that people didn't care as much about the business advice as they cared about the people behind the business. Like Teresa Davis, love Teresa, West 40 Market in Ankeny, best meat I've ever had. Her story of being a single mom during COVID, losing her job, and now she's working this meat market in Ankeny. That's what people connect with. Keith Murphy, they don't necessarily care about his sportscasting because they've seen it for so long. What they care about is the man behind the sportscasting. And I think that's the goal, is being willing to overadapt and change to a way that you're still true to the core, which is telling people's stories in my case, but you're not so stuck in a rut that you're losing subscribers because people don't care about how you're approaching it.
Oh, totally. That's really important to get in touch, like really get to know your listening demographic and who your listeners are, why they're listening, what they want to get out of it. I mean, it's fun to talk about yourself, but most people don't really want to listen to you just talk about yourself the whole time. Everybody's kind of like, not in a bad way, but we're all selfish. We all want to get something out of what we're listening to this podcast for a reason. We want to be entertained, informed, whatever. So I always, try to stay, get to the heart of what my listeners are wanting and give them that.
I get it. I'll stop talking about myself.
No, I'm enjoying it. It's great.
One of the things I did want to bring up is you've got this guy that you manage. You produce and co-host a podcast with him. His name's Doug Townson. Mm-hmm. He's kind of going
Holla.
Yeah, kind of going crazy.
Yes.
On social media. Like you said beforehand, he's not for everybody. So a little bit of maybe a content warning.
He is, total content warning. Okay. He is very controversial. He is not politically correct at all. But that is what has made people love him. I think he's very real and very raw and unfiltered. But he is, I thought he was going viral a few months ago. Now he's like, every day I think we are getting 10 to 20,000 new followers a day. So it's crazy. Yeah.
Goodness.
I know. Yeah. He's going to be up to 600,000 Instagram followers probably by the time we're out of this podcast.
Probably.
It's fun to watch the numbers go up, but yeah.
So how did you get involved with him?
So I have a freelance business where I manage people's social media and help them with things they don't have time for, don't know how to do. And I have a few clients, but I reached out to him right when he started going viral, and I asked him to come on my podcast because he has an amazing story to tell also about challenges he's faced in his life, and I wanted him to tell that story. That didn't end up happening, but he was like, I need help. He's like, I've got so much going on. I don't know how to do this. I know how to go viral, but I do not know how to manage the back end business side of things. And he trusted me. He had been with some like Hollywood type agents before that kind of screwed him over. And we just had a, good rapport. So he hired me and now I'm his manager. He wanted to do a podcast. I'm like, okay, I can start a podcast for you. And we did that. And now we're starting to tour all over the US and go to all sorts of stuff. So it's been crazy. And he's flying in tonight too. He's going to spend some time in Iowa. We're going to do some shows and stuff. So yeah.
Oh, I didn't even realize he wasn't in Iowa.
Oh, well, he's full time in Louisiana, but he goes back and forth because So it's hard to record a podcast remotely. I mean, yeah, we all do Zoom
Agreed.
or whatever. Yeah, but we prefer to do some. We've got some big guests coming up too that we want to do in person. So I'm happy to find the studio. I would like to rent it at some point, probably.
It's just how everything worked together is so awesome.
Yep. Yeah. So Doug's he's something else. He's hard to describe, but he's awesome though. He's a real genuine person.
That's awesome. And it sounds like just that community aspect again, just really working in your favor, and being willing to work with somebody and tell somebody stories that some people might write off because he is politically incorrect. He, his Instagram bio is, I love strippers and podcasts or something like that. Like,
I sell cars and I love strippers.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So he he was the number one car salesman in the state of Louisiana, which is interesting. And I can see why. He's very charismatic. He's very tell it like it is. So, yep. No BS with that guy.
That is absolutely true. I do want to pivot. So you're holding a book that you wrote.
Yes.
And I do want to pivot into that because, like we mentioned earlier, true crime is such a massive part of podcasting right now. So many of them, I kind of want to pick your brain on this a little bit. Why do you think that so many of them are solely run by women versus true crime podcasts that are run by men?
Well, I wish I knew. This is a question people ponder all the time, but women they do love true crime. I think has something to do with the fact that more often than not, women are also the victims of true crimes. And I think consuming true crime puts us in a position where we can view it from a safe distance and be in control and hear victim stories and things like that, and kind of learn maybe what not to do in life, what to do, what not to do, and how not to be a victim, I think. But I don't know. Yeah, it is definitely more female dominated for sure. Most of my true crime podcast friends, most of them there are a lot of men who host the shows, but I think the consumers are greatly female. Yeah.
From everybody that I've talked to, that's definitely how it comes across. I had a shout out to my friend Leah that I used to work with. She would binge true crime all the time. And I gave her crap. I gave her so much crap for it because she's like, this is terrifying. And I'm like, why are you listening? She goes, because it's good.
It's so good. It's so, I don't know. It's soothing to some people. A lot of people listen to true crime podcasts while they're falling asleep, which is why I created my podcast, True Crime Sleep Stories, because I was honing in on that demographic.
Yeah, so let's get into it. So let's talk about True Crime Sleep Stories.
Yeah, so I was one of those people who would listen to true crime podcasts while I was falling asleep. But the worst thing about that is when you wake up in the middle of like this gruesome detail and he got his head cut off and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's a terrifying thing to wake up to. So I wanted to make a podcast that was great for people who enjoy the true crime before bed with not so many of the gory details. And I tell the stories in like a soothing voice and have like very soothing music, kind of like a bedtime story that's not going to like jar them and wake them up with lots of different transitions and things like that. So basically my podcast is for people to fall asleep to, but I think that's really not the most of the people who listen to it are just kind of like, it's something they can have in their ears without having to think too much and not get shaken up by the details of a crime or something. But they're pretty short episodes too. And it transitioned into this book. So I have some networking contacts who they approached me and they said, your podcast would make a really good book. So it's basically all the episodes of my podcast are like a chapter of the book. So, yeah.
Interesting. You know, you can have it in your ear without thinking too much about it. It's basically Dave Matthews Band.
It's the Dave Matthews
Yeah, it's the Dave Matthews Band of True Crime Podcasts. Yes. I love it. That is really interesting, though, the idea of taking something that is such an auditory experience, which is the true crime. So I assume like you're the host on the True Crime Podcast. You're the one with the voice. How did you how difficult was it to transition that from being the auditory experience to more of a reading visual experience where people are imagining it with their own inner voices?
Oh, yeah. Like the transition from audio to a book, kind of. That was different because when I write my scripts, my podcast is very scripted. So
Gotcha.
something like this where we're just talking makes me really nervous because I'm used to being
You're doing
on a
very well.
script. But
Go team.
so I write out my scripts very detailed, but I write them in more of a conversational tone. So I did have to, I mean, I had them all done because I already have the script for the podcast, but I kind of like changed the point of view and a little bit of the wording, but it is very close to what my podcast is.
So it wasn't as difficult as
No.
initially thought.
No,
because
yeah.
It's pretty well written out already.
It's pretty well written out already, and it doesn't take me all that long actually to write a book, which is why Volume 2 is already coming out on Black Friday. So
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I love to hear that.
it's just a natural, moving into writing a book. I think it was just it all fell together really easily. So
If you were to write another book, do you think it would stay in that true crime lane, or would you
Yeah.
ever think about doing something like fiction or possibly something outside of that?
I would definitely write fiction. I love to write and I love crazy stories, but I would probably get into something paranormal because I love like paranormal weird stuff. And I do, there are tinges of paranormal, that's a hard word to say, paranormal stuff in my podcast too, because, a murder that takes place is a natural, there could be a haunting there later or something. So I dabble in a little bit of that in the podcast as well, just kind of mystery and spooky stuff. But
I can't wait for you to start writing kids' books. I think that's going to be awesome.
oh, it's going to be great, right? I think that someone should write a true crime book that's geared for kids. Wouldn't that be something? Like, how could we do that? Kind of like I guess there's like the Nancy Drew mysteries or something.
Yeah, there
in
we
the
go.
old days, but yeah.
Yeah, coming out next summer. Jason's First Kill.
But we make it cute.
Yeah, exactly. It's drawn like a little teddy bear. It's great.
Yeah.
It's fine. So, doing this book, what are some of the challenges that you've had to overcome in releasing the book? Did you go through a publisher? How did you find that publisher? Like, what was that process going from first draft to now it's published on Amazon?
Yeah. So Beyond the Fray Publishing came to me. This was their idea for me to write the book. But we have, contacts in common in the true crime space. So I think we followed each other on social media and they listened to my podcast a little bit and they were like, this would be a great fit. So that part was actually easy. I didn't have to search for a publisher or anything like that. And they have been phenomenal to work with. And they have they do books that are in the true crime genre and paranormal. They do also like ghosts, cryptids, UFOs, aliens, stuff like that, which is fun. But they've been great to work with. It's just, they ask, what's your timeline? When can you get this done? And then it goes into editing. And then I work with a cover designer to design all of that. And then they just take care of everything. It's been great, really great.
That's awesome. Sounds like they were super helpful with everything too.
Yeah, they've been helpful. And I was one of the number one new releases in the what was it? Forensic Biographies and Memoirs on Amazon. So I'm like, is that really what my book is? Okay, I'll take it.
There you go. That's really funny. I mean, we love cryptids here. Shout out Jeremiah Byron, Bigfoot Society podcast. I've had him on 2 times.
Oh, cool.
He's got the last episode. He talked about his own experience being out in Utah or Oregon, and it raised the hair on my arms.
Is it Skinwalker Ranch or what is that? There's something
I've heard of it.
Okay.
So my co-host Tyler, his nickname was Sasquatch, for a long time because he was really big into Bigfoot. And this guy Jeremiah, he was a youth leader at our church at the time, and so we got to be friends with him. And then he has this Bigfoot podcast, and we talk about going squatching together. And he told his story back earlier this summer. And
okay, wait, is there really a Bigfoot?
You'll have to listen to the episode. And
I
find
will.
out.
Do you know what I'm going to listen?
Some of the stories that he tells and the details that he's firsthand seen, I'm starting to believe a little bit now. And I'm somebody who's very skeptical about everything. But yeah, it's really cool. Both of the episodes that I did with him were very good for the first episode more so informing people about what cryptids are, what Bigfoot is. The second episode more so about his firsthand experience.
That's awesome. And we're coming on spooky season soon, so it's the perfect time for people to go back and listen to that episode. I will. But I'm a total skeptic too, but I am a geek about all things creepy. You got to
come down to Des Moines because they have a thing about half an hour away from Des Moines, Van Meter, the Van Meter Visitor, and it is...
I've heard of this.
It's crazy. We're going to take a little detour really quick because this story freaks me out, but it's awesome.
Yeah.
So back in the early 1900s, Van Meter, Iowa, they've reported seeing this giant bat-like creature flying around Van Meter to the point it was, I want to say 6 foot tall, this giant creature, and it would climb up telephone poles by using its beak like a parrot would. And so they chased it down to this mine, and the Des Moines Register said they had enough firepower to sink the Spanish Armada.
What?
So they ended up blowing up this mine basically, and then recently within the last couple of years people have reported sights of it again. And now there's a Van Meter Visitor Festival every year, and I think that happens in August or September, so I think we're already past it, but it's wild.
That sounds really fun. I didn't know there was a festival.
Yeah,
that's cool.
and that's only half an hour away from where I live.
Yeah.
You're telling me that I've never heard of this thing, and there are people there who are like, oh yeah, no, this is real. This isn't Bigfoot where it's a worldwide phenomenon. This is local, and I think it's cool.
Okay, well, I have stayed at the Villisca Axe Murder House several times, and I just thought that...
Several?
Yeah, I have. It's like an annual tradition. I have a group of podcasters and ghost hunters that comes with me. So, but that Van Meter Visitor sounds pretty cool.
It's really cool. I mean, most people go to Vegas for bachelorette parties, and Kelly's bringing all her friends to the Villisca Axe Murder House. Real fun.
Know how to party. See, this is where being a skeptic comes in again. A lot of people were feeling this negative stuff and were really scared. I totally was not. I was it was like camping out in a cozy little farmhouse. It did not bother me at all. So the story's horrible though.
I wonder how much the power of suggestion plays into that as well.
Yeah.
And the theatrics of it as well. Yeah, I have fun doing that, though. You'll never see me doing that.
Oh, my gosh. I also recently stayed at the Edinburgh Manor, if you've heard of that. It's abandoned. It's owned by somebody, but a mental hospital that from a long time ago, and it is super creepy. Now, I usually don't get scared of things like that. I was terrified at that place. It was very scary. We had all the ghost hunting equipment and the stuff that talks to you and says the words and stuff. That is so creepy. Oh my gosh, it was terrifying.
Yeah. If I wanted to go to a place full of trauma from a childhood, then I'll just go to my childhood home.
Good point.
Well, we do have to start wrapping up. As fun as this was to chat, really quick, I do want to ask, what got you into true crime?
Well, I just think the same thing we talked about earlier, I was one of those women who was a big consumer of true crime, Forensic Files, Dateline NBC, all the stuff. It's just, it's when you see a train wreck, you want to watch it, right? I have this morbid, weird curiosity of all things in the, this darker side of life. I'm very curious about that. And I kind of I'm why do serial killers kill? I want to know why they are different than me and why I would never do that, but they have a compulsion to do things like that. I wanted to get into people's minds and understand, I think, why, and then just see how crimes happen, what led up to it, to also protect myself too. And, you know, Molly Tibbetts' murder was something that really impacted me when that happened. And that's about the time I started my podcast. And there were a lot of like violent crimes happening against women. And it just made me really want to like tell their stories and do that. So,
well, I applaud you for doing that. It's such a dark thing to talk about that I find anybody who talks about it regularly with that sort of resolve, I admire them. I think that you're doing something fantastic. True crime sleep stories. Man, it's a little bit of a tongue twister for a title.
Like Paranormal was
yeah,
for
Paranormal.
me.
True crime sleep stories available on Amazon. You want to show them the cover? Let's
Oh,
see that
sure,
cover.
yes.
Where did that idea come from? Did you have any input on that at all?
I had a little bit, but in hindsight, this is a pretty dark book cover.
Yeah.
My son was like, that's kind of cringy, Mom. But no, I love the book designer we use. But yeah, it's just spooky. She's in bed reading and yeah.
It's a great metaphor for the damage that social media does to your life.
That's right.
We're going to go with that.
Kill us all one day.
Exactly. True crime sleep stories available on Amazon. You said the second part's coming out on Black Friday.
It is. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
Where can we find you? Where can we keep up with you to see what else you've got releasing?
Instagram is my main place. Kelli with an I, Kelli Brink. Kelli Brink, and you can follow True Crime Sleep Stories as well on Instagram, and all my links are on there. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, Kelli, thank you very much for taking the time to drive down here, be part of such a special event like this. Like, this means the world to me to be able to have somebody who not only loves podcasting, but has the experience needed that some of the other podcasters may need to hear.
Well, thank you.
I thoroughly appreciate it. You are always welcome on my podcast, and
I would love to come back sometime. That
absolutely.
would be great. We can talk about spooky shit.
Absolutely. Next time you're in Des Moines, let me know, and I've got a mic for you.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being an outsider, and as always, folks, be kind to each other.